190. Let's get to the fourth Transformers film, which is Transformers Age of Extinction. Came out in 2014, done by Bay. Stars Mark Wahlberg, so no more Shia LaBeouf. Basically a whole new cast, as well as Nicola Peltz Beckham, Jack Rayner, Stanley Tucci, Kelsey Grammer, Titus Welliver. And the synopsis is: when humanity allies with a bounty hunter in pursuit of Optimus Prime, the Autobots turn to a mechanic and his family for help. So this one is really a reboot instead of being the fourth film in the, I guess, narrative story. And I did not see this one in theaters. I saw it maybe a couple years after. I've seen, like I've talked about with the last few films, I seem to be in the minority here, but this flat out, not say it's an amazing movie or even a good movie, but of the Michael Bay films, this is by far my favorite. Big Things, to me, it's the most memorable. The action is the most coherent and it looks the best. Even just talking about cinematography, lighting, it looks great, but I think action-wise, special effects are even better than the first three and even better than 5, I think. The cast of characters, like Mark Wahlberg, as much as I enjoy Shia LaBeouf as an actor, I think Mark Wahlberg's character of Cade Yeager, terrible name yet again for a lead, but he is a much more interesting, not complex, but bearable hero, as opposed to Shia LaBeouf, who's always just having panic attacks and yelling all over the place. Mark Wahlberg is much more of a calm, composed lead character to follow. Also, to a certain degree, the plot is a lot simpler, and more than anything, really, due to a number of factors, I guess, I'm always, despite the shameful runtime of this movie, which is 165 minutes, brutally long, despite that, I'm almost always engaged and entertained by this movie. Whereas I feel like in the first three, there are large stretches where I'm getting really tired of it. I'm getting frustrated. I'm getting completely lost. And in this one, I've seen it maybe 3 or 4 times now over the years. I'm always pretty focused, even though there are points that are not good and there are some things that are for sure flawed. But talking about some specifics, so it has all the same, for the most part, the same issues as the other, so I'm not going to get into all that again. But some small issues that still bug me that are specific to this movie in terms of how he presents things. The way he, whether it's intentional or not, how he can talk down to his audience and really make his movies feel dumber than they already are. When you first meet Cade Yeager, as he's driving in the Texas sunset back to his ranch, you see superimposed on the screen Texas, USA. And I'm just like, I really don't think at this point, of all the states in America, do you really need to specify that Texas is in the United States? It just seems so, even how a lot of filmmakers now still feel a need to put London, England, or like Paris, France. Like how stupid can we be? I think at this point, with big capitals, with big states, you can cut out the second identifier. Then, of course, Mark Wahlberg's daughter, who's 17, specified in the movie. Of course, she is like a sex object in how she dresses. All she wants to do is go to college and get drunk. And then all the men around her father oogle her and like basically catcall her, even though, again, they specify she's 17 years old. So that's just totally unnecessary and excessive. And I promise I'll get to some things I like. I just want to get all the minute things that don't always have an effect on the movie at this point with just how Michael Bay is, but they're just so ridiculous that I might as well mention them while I have the chance. But there's a scene where, because Cade Yeager is behind on his bills because he is a quote-unquote inventor, even though he's never doing anything right and can never actually create something, and he's expecting to pay off his ranch, buy this and pay for college and this ludicrous things. There's a scene where the realtor shows up with this possible buyer couple who are interested in getting this ranch or farm, and Mark Wahlberg basically scares him off with a baseball bat, and he throws the baseball bat at the car and hits it. And then for some reason, the realtor drives through the barbed wire fence and drives through a wheat field. And it just seems so stupid. If you're trying to get out of a place, you don't want your car harmed. All you're doing is harming your own car. You're not hurting Mark Wahlberg's character. For no reason at all, even though there's a road right next to her, she feels the need to drive and damage her car by driving through a thick, barbed wire metal fence. And that scene always just gets me. I'm like, what are you doing? And like, why did you feel the need, Michael Bay, that is, to put that in there? But then some things I do like. Overall, the cast is good. I like Stanley Tucci a lot. Kelsey Grammer is good, even though his character is pretty goofy. TJ Miller, typically I find funny. He's all right in this, but he's a very typical Michael Bay male character. And spoilers here, it is really excessive what happens to him in terms of being scorched by this transformer. Like they're in this garage parking deck action sequence, and then there's this really epic, cool explosion runaway chase that they do, and it's classic Michael Bay in the best way. But then TJ Miller's character gets burned, his whole body burnt to a crisp in running motion, and they cut back to that shot multiple times before moving to the next scene. And it seems, for the character that he is, a little much for the horrible death that he has, but whatever. Although, one, actually, speaking of another issue, and I think it seems to be widely discussed, is Jack Rayner, who plays the boyfriend of Mark Wahlberg's daughter. His accent is the most fake, confused, over the top, just downright terrible accent that it sounds like he's doing Irish, then English, then Australian, then like New Zealand. I don't know what on earth caused Michael Bay to think that was a good idea when he could just be English. Like there's pretty much one Irish joke in the whole movie, and that's really all it has to do with him being quote unquote Irish. And that character is so distracting because every time he talks, it feels like, what are you doing? Whose horrible idea was this to ruin? Because he's not a terribly written character, aside from him just being a jerk to Mark Wahlberg, but the accent is so ridiculous and phony that it just takes me out. And whenever he starts talking, I'm like, please just stop. Let's just get through whatever lines you have. Some funny lines, though, which is pretty rare for a Michael Bay movie for me. It's rare I'm genuinely laughing at a line. I'm usually laughing at how bad it is. But there's a line with Lockdown, the villain transformer, where he's talking to Kelsey Grammer's character, and Kelsey Grammer is saying, well, we have a saying on this planet, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. And then Lockdown, and this is really one of the only moments in all of the films that I felt like the Transformers had a true personality and someone behind them. But he goes, I also have a saying, I don't care. That line gets me every time. It just feels so authentic, like a screw you, snarky personality where clearly Kelsey Grammer has no sway on the Transformers and is just a politician. That's a great line. It's more so ridiculous, but where Optimus Prime jumps out of the barn when the government agents show up and he's like, here I am. There's a lot of really bad, goofy stuff in there that, for the most part in this, I don't know why it works better than in others where it's more cringe in those and not as much in this one, but I still get a lot of kicks out of it. I guess there was a criticism with the first three where a lot of people couldn't tell the Transformers apart, aside from Optimus Prime, which I would generally agree with. And in this, I actually like the group and the design of the core Transformers. So it's Hound, the John Goodman character who has the beard and the cigar, which is awesome. There's the Katana Transformer, played by Ken Watanabe, and then Crosshairs. But going back to Lockdown, I actually think, even though there's nothing dynamic, really well written about that character, I think how he's shot and the design, the voice, sound design really works and is a good, intimidating villain despite it being shallow. It still is much better, I think, than any of the other villains in the Michael Bay film. So that's a strong point. I love a good villain. Before I forget or get too far into this franchise, one thing I haven't really mentioned at all yet with Michael Bay is product placement. There are actually videos online where they will show all of the product placement in Michael Bay films, and really, in this one especially, and onwards, it's shameful how blatant and obvious and in your face it is. Because the worst one, I think, of his whole career is the scene where they crash the spaceship in the city streets, and Mark Wahlberg gets out because this guy's car was ruined by the crash, and there is a close-up shot of a Bud Light truck crashing, and then Bud Light rolling all over the ground. The logo in your face, that's the only thing that's being presented. There's no story element, there's no nothing. It's just Bud Light here, drink Bud Light. Basically, it's almost like a commercial. And so that I cannot stand. I hate that. And that shows you the shallowness of Michael Bay, or how shallow he can be when given the opportunity or given the right money or whatever. So I really don't like that in all of his films. And then even in that sequence where it shows the really, I'd say, like, toxic masculinity that he portrays, but not at all in a commentary sort of way, is when Mark Wahlberg is talking to this disgruntled guy, and he just picks up a Bud Light bottle, drinks a lot of it, then throws it into the guy's already damaged car and just walks away like he's the coolest guy on earth, like a badass. I'm like, dude, this is the worst. You do not need to put this stuff in here. And it adds nothing. It makes you dislike, at least for me, it makes me dislike those characters more. But besides that, I'd say, and I know everyone has their own favorite Michael Bay shots, especially if you're a fan or a aficionado. To me, the best, coolest shot that he has ever done in his whole career, and it also not only is just a cool shot, but it encapsulates everything you need to know about Michael Bay in a 7-10 second sequence. It's on the highway chase in the middle of the movie where it starts, it's all in slow-mo, and Optimus Prime and Bumblebee are launched, or like they jump over a bridge on the highway. And as I think they're both turning separate directions. And then Mark Wahlberg, his daughter, and the boyfriend are all flung up into the air. They're all spinning in different directions and flying over this bridge. And then Bumblebee pops the human characters upwards so they can carry the momentum forward. And then they burst through I think a tractor trailer, and debris goes flying everywhere. Then Bumblebee grabs the human characters, twisting around as they're falling over the other side of the bridge, and then they land on that side. And that, I can go back and watch that 10-second shot over and over and over again. That is truly where I'm like, Michael Bay, that was amazing. That is a perfect use of slow-mo, of Bayhem, of special effects, of maintaining all of that, but also being completely coherent. Then also another really epic moment, and it goes back to the villain, is when they're on that, I think it's right after the highway sequence actually, where the alien ship comes down, Mark Wahlberg and the human characters are there with Prime, and then you see from the smoke from the alien ship, Lockdown coming through, walking down the road in this really epic, slow-mo, intimidating way. And it's such an epic shot. It makes me love seeing that villain on screen. But then after that, unfortunately, he kind of ruins it when Cade Yeager's daughter is taken away, and there's this way overdone use of slow-mo where Mark Wahlberg is screaming, "No!" and he's slamming his fist on the ground in frustration. And it's so goofy and overdone for the kind of movie that this is. And it, to me, shows that Michael Bay, he loves slow-mo, like I was just talking about, but he doesn't know when to use it and when not to use it. He just says, all right, let's just use slow-mo at this point in time. It's got to be good. And so you have, in a 5-minute sequence, you have the coolest shot that he's ever done with the highway chase, and then you have probably one of the goofiest parts of the movie with that fist slamming down. Then there's the alien ship sequence inside the ship, which I think that goes on too long. I don't mind the look of the ship, but it just feels like it drags, and the pacing kind of, as bad as the pacing already is, it feels like it really comes to a halt for a little too long. But thankfully, you then have the chase through the city where there are the hyena transformers or the dog transformers, and there's that great moment where they're flying down the river or over the river, and one of the transformers picks up a boat in the river and throws it upwards, and it crashes into one of the other ships. That's awesome. There's the moment where Crosshairs uses the parachute, like jumps off the ship and uses the parachute, and another great use of slow-mo. And I think that one reason why I like this one, not to say that the others don't offer a variety of locations, but I feel like this one uses the global setting very well, where they're really country hopping and all these different places and cool visuals. And so I think this one by far offers the most variety in terms of that, which I appreciate, and keeps the, for the most part, keeps the momentum going along. Then you also have the Dinobots, which pretty fake, phony marketing there, where that was a big thing in the trailers, and they're only in the last maybe 10 minutes of the movie, maybe 15. So I don't really care how much they are or are not in the movie. I didn't even realize that was a thing until I watched it, so I don't care about that. But I know that was a frustration with some diehard fans. There's also some really lazy writing with the human government agencies trying to take the Transformers DNA basically and make their own version of Transformers, where they call it Transformium. I wonder how long it took them to come up with that. So there is just a lot of lazy, like, geez, you couldn't have spent 5 more minutes on this, but whatever. But then you also have a really another great epic shot where towards the end, and I think it's in the trailers, where Stanley Tucci is going, "Oh my God!" and you see this ship being basically carried over them by, I think it's by the alien ship or something like that, or by the gravitational pull, whatever that is. Oh, and actually one more logic issue that, not a big deal, but it sort of bugs me, is when they're on the alien ship, the alien weapons somehow are human-sized or become human-sized, and Mark Wahlberg, Jack Rayner, everybody are just able to use them with no problems. And while everything is already ridiculous and illogical, I'm just thinking, okay, so why would the aliens, the Transformers, have weapons for the exact size of humans, and or why would you allow humans to be able to operate them so easily? Just here, pull the trigger. You know, it just seems very silly based on how seemingly sophisticated the Transformers are. Overall, for whatever reason, this movie just clicks with me at this point. It's a guilty pleasure. So that one is a light 4 out of 5.